Good morning. We're back at it. We're in the second half of September. We're fishing New Lake, although it's not really a new lake anymore because this is day 6 here. And really the game plan today is to just have some fun and work over our spots where we have good anchor positions. But the second thing I'm looking forward to doing today is getting back to trolling the lake and mapping the lake, because we have gotten to know the lake pretty well from 8 feet and shallower, but we don't know it very well past that. When we first started fishing this lake late summer, the thermocline was at 12 and a half, and I typically don't bother looking below the thermocline, but last time we were here, we found the thermocline had dropped to around 17 feet. I'm guessing today it's probably even lower than that. And eventually, by the time the ice forms over the lake this winter, the majority of the bass, or at least the bass we're looking for, the ones that'll be schooled up where we can make a nice catch, are going to be moving deeper and deeper into their wintering home. So our goal between now and ice out is to find where those fish are and maybe get lucky and be in the right place at the right time, fishing in the right manner, and catch a bunch of them. A quick update on my observations of weather and water conditions today. First thing I noticed with regard to the water is the water level in the lake is much higher than normal, and I believe that's a result of runoff from severe storms north of here. So there's also a pretty heavy current running out of the lake in the river, so and there's a bloom on the water, which is likely the result of a lot of rainwater and nutrients coming in. So we have that in the back of our head today. Also, as I mentioned, it is the second half of September, so we have 2 changing conditions. We have a changing light condition where the days are getting shorter, and we also have a changing water temp condition as the lake is cooling down from summer temps. So both of those create a little bit of instability, and what does that mean for our day of fishing? We don't know, but it's important to have a general awareness of the conditions you're facing when you go out fishing. So that's my observation. All the writings that Buck put down on paper for guidelines for us really changed my fishing. I was a fisherman for many years, 20 years, pretty avid fisherman, before I ran into a spoon plugger on a lake that was kicking my butt muskie fishing, and he told me about Buck Perry's book, Spoon Plugging, and I read it, and immediately a light went off. And the very next year, I caught more 5-pound bass than I had caught in the last 20 years. But I think some of the big keys are really understanding what a structure is and how the fish are using that structure, and more importantly, how to present your lures properly. I think the biggest weakness I see with fishermen is they might be on the right spot, but they're not fishing it in the right manner. In case any of you are curious about my Alabama rig, this is made by Yum, and you can only fish with 3 hooks in many states, so these top 2 are just dummy rigs on screw locks, and then the bottom 3, I believe these are 1/4 ounce right now, and typically my middle lure I like to have just a slightly different color. This is often the one they hit, so I make that a slightly different color. I don't know if it matters, but trying to pull them away from these two to focus either on this guy or the bottom two. These bottom two or the middle one are the ones they most often hit. So that's why I put the dummy rigs up on top. And by not having some weight on top, I think it helps the rig run a little truer, where the bottom three weights keep these top two higher up in the water column. So far things seem a little slow in our first two spots. But again, you never know what the day will bring. So I'm working with some new audio equipment, and at this point in my video it wasn't working so well, so I'm just doing a quick voiceover here. As you can see from this video, I just threw on a topwater bait, actually called a Whopper Plopper. And the reason being is that I fished most of the key spots in the lake, and things just seem really strange, strangely slow. There again, I mentioned there was a lot. The water's really high, and just things weren't quite working. So every once in a while, you have to think outside the box and keep an open mind. And I just decided, you know what? I'm going to check over the tops of some of these weed flats. And sometimes the top of the water can be a break, and it just, for whatever reason, under certain conditions, is a good trigger. What I find it to be is more of a 5% type lure. I'm not a big top water guy, but you have to keep options like this in the back of your head. And so, okay, we're on the second or third cast here. Watch the lure coming in. We do get a blow up right there and missed him. So I found that to be pretty interesting after working over our 2 or 3 key spots pretty thoroughly, to get a blow up on just a second cast or so. See if there's any more. So this is about 2 casts later. I make a pretty long cast over the weed flat, and just try and keep an eye on the lure. If you can see it, it's a little far out in the distance, but we get a nice fish here. At this point, it's clear with a blow up and a nice fish that there's something to the top water in this particular situation, and just in situations that you may run into from time to time. You know, why did I throw it? It was just more of a gut feeling. But you just always have to be thinking when you're on the water, and if things aren't working, the normal stuff that you're used to, especially when you're been fishing structures that in the past have produced, you start changing speeds, and then when that doesn't work, you just, in this particular case, it just, like I said, it had a gut feeling, and so it was pretty clear. It's pretty clear at this point that there's something going on here, on a pretty difficult water condition. Here we've moved on to another key structure that we've had a lot of success on the lake. After catching a couple nice fish on topwater in that previous structure, I just made a nice long cast over about 4 to 6 feet, right near the break line, and we get another nice fish here. I can tell that this is a much bigger fish. And one of the reasons I keep coming back to this lake is because the quality of the fish on these spots is really high. Um, I think almost every trip I've caught fish over 4 pounds, and usually one or two fish in the 3 pound range, and it's just such a pleasure to have that type of quality that it's hard not to keep going back. 4.5, another 4.5 pounder. Here I'm on that same structure. I just am casting a little bit behind me. Actually switched away from the top water after making a number of follow-up casts after catching the 4.5 pounder. I moved to a chatterbait. I'm just was casting it along this 6 foot break line and caught another fish here. We then went to the troll for the most of the remainder of the day, and actually had quite a bit of video recorded discussing some of my thoughts on trolling and some of the things that I've learned over time from my mentors, and just spending many hours trolling. But we'll come back to that another time because the audio didn't quite work out. But we did spend about 4 hours trolling in the 12 to 14 range around the lake. We did stop to cast in a few areas and check out deeper, but it was just one of those days where I could tell things were off from the super high water. Ended up learning quite a bit deeper. Didn't find anything super interesting, but it's always good to, when you get out on a body of water and you at least learn a little bit more about what's going on beneath you. That is our first bass in many, many, many hours. hard to come by today. Well, it was a tough day. We did a lot. Caught a 4.5 pounder, so we'll call it a success. Fish seemed to be going a little bit early. They were funky. We ended up getting them on the top water lure. Did a lot of trolling, like we said we would. And then right at the end of the day here, caught a few more. And attribute it to the water conditions. The lake's really high, and I'm just assuming that maybe affected the fish a little bit. Also, I don't know, maybe this warming trend we're having maybe messing them up, because we had water temps dropping, and then it looks like it's now reversing a little bit. So I don't know. Anyway, it's a good day on the water. We'll see you next time.